Okay, so this is the final review. There are 25 questions on here. It's very, very similar to your final exam. So let's get started. It says use the quadratic formula to find the exact solutions. Okay, if you recall, the quadratic formula is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay. And so when we're solving this, we've got this equation that says 4t squared minus 7t is equal to 1. Well, you have to have the equation equal to 0. So we're going to need to move this 1 to the other side of our equal sign. So 4t squared minus 7t minus 1 is equal to 0. Okay, this is going to leave me with my a equal to 4, b equal to negative 7, and c is equal to negative 1. And we're going to go up here and plug these values in. So we've got a negative b, so negative 7, so b is negative 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared, b is negative 7, we're squaring that, minus 4 times our a, which is also 4, times c, which is negative 1. And we're going to do that all over 2 times a, which is 4. Okay, so a negative 7 is just going to be positive 7 plus or minus. Okay, then I would probably figure out, well, what is all of this stuff underneath the square root? So I would type that negative 7 squared minus 4 times negative 1 in my calculator. Okay, and I'm coming up with 65 for that. Okay, and then that's all going to be over 8. Okay, so what I'm noticing by looking at my answers over here is it looks like we might already have the answer. We're not taking the square root of a negative number. It looks like our correct answer is going to be D, and it's already listed over there. There was nothing I could factor out of that. Okay. Question number 2 says that it wants us to factor 6x squared plus 8xy minus 15xy minus 20y squared. Okay. So when we look at these options here, we can almost work our way backwards if we wanted to, but it's wanting us to pull out the correct factorization of this. So if we're going to work forwards, I would go ahead probably and combine these two terms. Okay, and so we would have, let me back up. I think they want, there's several ways. First off, there's several ways to do this. I think that they're hinting that they want you to factor by grouping since they've already separated that out. So let me make it a little bit easier on us. So 6x squared plus 8xy. And we kind of separate that from our minus 15xy minus 20y squared. Well, when I look at this, I can notice that I can pull, if I look at my 6 and my 8, both of those have a 2 that I could pull out. And I could also, they both have at least one x in it, so I could pull an x out of both of those terms. I can't pull out any y's. So if I take a 2 out of 6, 6 divided by 2 would leave me with 3. If I take an x squared, if I take an x out of that, that's just going to leave me with x. Okay, so when I multiply 2x plus times 3x, I would get back my 6x squared. Also, if I take a 2 out of 8, that would leave me with a positive 4. If I take my x out, I wouldn't have any x's, and I would have a y here. Okay, so what we would like to happen is we would like for this over here to end up being 3x plus 4y, because if it is, and they're exactly the same, then we can factor by grouping. So I kind of want to make this happen. So I'm going to say, well, if I can take a 5, I can take a negative 5 out of both of those. I can take a y out of both of these terms. Okay, and what we want to do is just check to make sure it equals. So -5 times 3 is -15. X times y is xy. -5 times 4 is -20, and y times y is y squared. Okay, so it did work out. So we can pull these two together, 2x minus 5y. And then since these are exactly the same, they can go right here, 3x plus 4y. Now, it doesn't really matter which one I put in the front and the back, as long as I've got the parentheses the same. Okay, so our right answer is going to be B. Okay, it says use synthetic division to divide this. So remember that when we're using synthetic division, if this is a -6, we want to make it a +6. Then we want to put our coefficients in order and then our constant term in the back. So you want to always make sure that you've got x squared and it's going, I guess, down in descending order. So the next term would be x to the first, and then we would have x to the 0 power, and this one's good. If it was missing something, we would need to put a 0 for that. So we've got a 4, -29, and a 30. So using synthetic division, you're going to bring the 4 down. You're going to do 4 times 6, which is 24. You're going to add -29 plus 24 is -5. -5 times 6 is going to be -30. You're going to add those and get 0. So this has a remainder of 0. The term that is left, if you started with an x squared, you're going to go down 1. So this is going to be 4 to the x to the first power, since it was 4x squared. To begin with, you would go down 1. So x squared goes to x to the first, and then -5. Okay, and so the correct answer, C. Okay. Now, if we want to solve this, there's several ways that we could talk about solving this, but one thing that I'm noticing is we need a common denominator. And so 2 automatically goes into 6. So we want something that both 2 and 6 will go into. And when we find that, we want to multiply the whole thing by that. So I know that 2 and 6 will both go into 6. So I'm going to multiply by 6 through the whole fraction. And what's going to happen is it's going to get rid of that bottom term. So I'm going to have 6x divided by 2 minus 6x divided by 6 is equal to 9 times 6, which is 54. Okay. Now, 2 will go into 6 3 times, so that ends up being just 3x. 6 will go into 6 1 time, so this is just an x equals 54. 3x take away an x is 2x. Divide by 2, so x ends up being 27, which is A. Okay. Let's look at number 5. It says simplify by factoring. Assume no radicans were formed by raising negative numbers to even powers. So in this example, what we know is, I'm going to go ahead and just separate it all out. 20, if we look at the prime factors of 20, 2 will go into 20 10 times, 2 will go into 10 5 times, and then that's it, right? 2, 2, and 5. So 20 is 2 times 2 times 5. Then we have 7 K's and 8 Q's. Okay, so remember, we can pull out anything we have a pair of. So we've got a pair of 2's. We've got 1, 2, 3 pairs of K's. We can pull each one of those out. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Q's, pairs of Q's that we can pull out. Okay, and what we have left underneath is a 5 and a K that we did not mess with. So that's pretty much what we're going to have underneath. Since I've got 3 k's, that's going to be k to the third, and I've got 4 q's, that's going to be 4 to the q, q to the fourth, sorry. So the right answer is going to be C here. Okay, it says find an equation of a line containing the given pair of points. Okay, and so we want to use the formula y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. We're also going to have to find the slope, and the formula for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And you want to find the slope first so that you can plug it into your formula. So I'm going to let this be my x1, y1, and let this be my x2, y2. So when I'm finding my slope, it says to do y2 minus y1. So my y2 is negative 11, my y1 is negative 2, so I would say negative 11 minus negative 2. Okay, now I've got x2 minus x1, so negative 2 minus a negative 5. Okay, and a minus minus is a plus, so negative 11 plus 2 is negative 9. Negative 2 plus 5 is 3, and negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3. So this is my slope that I would plug in right here for m. Now, I'm going to plug in the rest of the formula. So y minus y1. Y1 is negative 2, so it's minus a negative 2. Then x minus x1, and x1 in our case is negative 5. So y minus minus turns into a plus. This is going to be x plus 5. Okay, and we can see over here that this is solved for y. So we're going to go ahead and distribute this negative 3. That's going to get me negative 3x. And negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. Then we're going to need to subtract 2 from both sides. So y is equal to negative 3x minus 17. Okay, so on number 6, the correct answer is C. Okay. Number 7 says factor out a factor with a negative coefficient. So when I'm looking at negative 15 u to the 4th minus 10 u to the 3rd plus 25 u, one thing I'm noticing is that in 15, I'm ignoring the negatives right now, but in 15 and 10 and 25, 5 will be something that I could pull out of all of those. When you look at the answer and you look at the question, they say pull out a negative 5. So we're going to pull out our negative 5. I can pull out a u because each one of these have at least one u in them. Okay, so that makes sense. So negative 15 divided by negative 5 is going to be 3. If I take a u out of u to the 4th, that's going to be u to the 3rd. Negative 10 divided by negative 5 is a positive 2. If I take a u out of u to the 3rd, that's going to be u squared. 25 divided by negative 5 is going to be negative 5. And if I take the u out of u, then that's going to be, that I wouldn't have any u's left over here. Okay, so on number 7, the correct answer is going to be C. It says find the slope of the line. What you want to keep in mind is that y equals mx plus b is the equation that has the slope in it that's easiest to find. The slope is always in front of the x if it's written like this. So if I have something that says 7x minus 2y equals 14, I need to rearrange it so that it has the y in the front. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 7x. that's good. And so what I'm doing is moving everything away from the y. So that's 14 minus 7x. And the way that it's written up here, they have the minus 7x written in the front, but it really doesn't matter. We're going to divide everything by -2. So we would have y equals 7 over 2, because a negative divided by a negative is positive. And then 14 divided by -2 is -7. So our slope, the number in front of the x here, after we solved it for y, is 7 over 2. So on number 8, the correct answer is A. Okay, honestly, the easiest way to do this problem is to just type it in your calculator. We know that this is 5 1/3. On the bottom, 3 minus, and I'm going to go to the graphing calculator and just type it all in as 1 instead of doing what I'm doing right now, because that's just making it more complicated than it has to be. So we've got 5. So let me get out of the screen real quick and just show you what I would do to type this in. Type it in exactly how they have it. So if you do alpha y equals, you want to start with your fraction. And then the problem said to do 5 plus 1/3. So I would just go here and say 5 plus alpha y equals, because we need a 1/3. Okay, and on the bottom it says 3 minus 2/9. So I'm typing in 3 minus alpha y equals, enter 2/9. It takes a little while to type this in, which is kind of a pain, but then I have an answer of 48 over 25. Okay, and that's what they're looking for. They'll let you leave it as a mixed fraction. So 48 over 25, I'm done. So that's something that you can just use your calculator to do on that problem. So it's going to be A on that one. Okay. Number 10 says simplify and write your answers in the form A plus BI. So when you see something like this, you want to be reminded that of a couple of things. You know that the square root of a -1 is equal to I. That's where we get I from. And if we have I squared, then that is going to be equal to -1. Okay, so you need to know those things to work this problem. Secondly, you should recognize that we're going to use FOIL to do this, that first, outer, inner, last. So 9 times 7, we calculate that. That's my first. Outer would be plus a 9 times 6i. Inner, so plus, and I'm going to separate this out because it's got a negative in front of it. So -6i times 7. And then I've got my last terms, so -6i times 6i. So my first, outer, inner, last, that's what I'm going to get. 9 times 7 is going to give me 63. Okay. 9 times 6i is going to get me 54 i's. A -6 times 7 is going to get me -42 I. And now I've changed my plus into just minus, because this would be plus a -42i, which means minus 42i. And then I've got -6 times -6, which is going to be -36. I times I would be I squared. Okay, now it looks like we could get rid of a couple of things. It looks like these two can come together. So positive 54 minus 42 is going to get you a positive 12i. Okay, and now keep in mind that we know that I squared is negative 1. So this is really 63 plus 12i plus, because we've got a negative 36 times negative 1 plus 36. Well, the 63 and the 36 can go together. Okay, and that's going to get me 99. And then I've got my plus 12i. And so the right answer on number 10 is going to be C. Okay, they're asking me to factor this out. And if you'll kind of look here, you'll always kind of eyeball your answers, but you'll notice that on this one and this one, they pulled a 2 out first. And that's exactly what you want to do. You want to be able to see if you can pull something out of this to begin with. So there is a 2 in each one of these terms. So we can take a 2 out first. If we pull a 2 out of 2x squared, that's going to leave me with x squared. If we pull a 2 out of negative 14, that's going to be negative 7x. If we pull a 2 out of 24, we're going to have a positive 12. So now we're looking for, we're only worried about this part, which we're not worried about the 2. It's going to be in our answer, but we're looking for something that multiplies to 12 and adds to negative 7. So I'm thinking negative 3 times negative 4, because negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12, but when you add those, you get a negative 7. Okay, and so this is where you would put x minus 3, x minus 4 in those spots. Okay, so on number 11, the correct answer is C. So solve using addition and multiplication principles together. This is really just solving an equation problem, so very easy. We're just trying to figure out what n is, so we would go and add 10 to both sides of our equal sign. So we've got 2n is equal to 10, divide by 2. So n is equal to 5. The right answer is going to be B on that one. Number 13 says solve the systems of equations by elimination. So when we were working these type of problems, remember that you have to have everything lined up. And what I mean by that, you've got your x's in a row, your y's in a row, your equal sign in a row, and your constant number in a row. Okay, and what you want to happen is something to cancel out when you add the rows. Okay, so I'm noticing that I could easily make this top row be a negative 6, and if I have this bottom row being a positive 6, if I add them, they would cancel out. And you're allowed to multiply a row as long as you multiply every single thing in that row by that number. So negative 6 times x is going to be negative 6x. Negative 6 times negative 6y would give me a positive 36y. Then we've got our equal sign, and then 24 times negative 6 is negative 144. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm squishing that up over here. But now I'm going to write the second row right underneath it, because when I add these, a negative 6 and a positive 6 is going to be nothing. That's going to get rid of my x's. 36 plus a negative 5 would give me positive, sorry, I don't know why I wrote negative, positive 31. And then negative 144 plus 51 is negative 93. Then we would be able to solve for y by dividing by 31 And that's going to give us the answer that y is -3. So there's the first part of my answer. So I kind of already know that these are written as coordinates x comma y, and the only one that has a -3 is c. So I kind of think that's the answer. But to figure out what x is, you would pick one of your equations. It doesn't matter which equation you pick. You plug in what you found. So we found out that y was -3, so we're going to plug in a 3 there. And then you solve for x. So -6 times -3 is +18. It's going to subtract 18 from both sides. So x is 24. Take away 18, which is 6, which is what we have right here in our coordinates. So the right answer is C. So another way you know you're correct is if you plug your 6 and your -3 back in for x and y, it should work on both equations. Okay, on number 14, it says graph the linear equation. Okay, so here is our y equals 4/3 x minus 1. Okay, remember that we talked just a little while ago about how we have an equation that's y equals mx plus b. M is the slope, that's your rise over run. B is your y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis. And so you always want to graph your y-intercept first, and our y-intercept is a -1. So we want to go to the graph, and we want to see if any of these go through -1. So on the y-axis, it would be the point where x is 0 and y is -1. So it looks like these are going by 2's because this is always already at -10. So this would be a -2. So this is -2, -4, -6, -8, -10. So this one actually could be going through -1. It looks like it's a little bit below 0. This one's not it, right? That one's going above. This one's not it. This one looks like it's going through 0, 0 actually. So I don't think that's it either. Just to make sure this is right, we know to get to the next point, we want to use our slope of 4/3, which means we would want to rise 4 and run 3, sorry. So from here, we want to rise 4. So 1, 2. So if this is -1, this would be 0 would be going up 1. 1 would be going up 2. This right here would be 2. So we've gone up 3. And by the time we get to 3, we've gone up 4. And then our run is going over 3. So 1.5. So let me see if I've got this on the right scale. So our y-intercept's at -1. We would want to go up 1. They're going up by 2's, and we're running 3. This graph is very hard to read. They are saying, let me look at this. I guess that could be, they're saying the right answer is D. I was questioning this one because the slope was wrong on it. It does look like it goes through -1. And so they're saying that this is also going through -1. So if we go up 1, we would be, so this is our slope. I'm going to make this going up by, it's just hard, it's too hard to explain it going up by 2. So they're saying that, so this would be our -1. And on this graph, this first line is at -2. So we would go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we would run 1, 2, 3 to get to what our line looks like. So on this graph that they've got, let me erase what I put so it's a little bit easier to see. This graph is going up by 2. So when I start at -1, if I go up 1, I'm at 0. And this right here would be +1. I've gone up 2. This would be going up, 1 more would be going up 3. Right here would be rising 4. Then we would want to run 1.5 to get to 3, which is exactly what this is. It's like right in the middle. So they've gone up 4 and ran 3. It's just that this graph is going by 2, so it's hard to see that. but right here is going to be D. It was easy to rule out B and C. And the way that I ruled out A is because I could tell that the slope was off. To get to the next point, it's not going up 4 and over 3. It's a lot more than that. So going to have to eyeball that. You can use your graphing calculator to help you with questions like this, because you could go to y equals and type that in. Because that graph was so hard to read, let me show you something really quick on your graphing calculator that might help you if you get a question like that, because that was a little bit different. So if I had, or a little bit difficult to read that graph. So let's say I'm really struggling with this. I go to y equals, I want to type in my equation that was 4/3 times x, and it was -1, I do believe, and hit enter, and then I look at the graph. And then secondly, what I could do is I could go second table. Okay, now this table that I've got has a 0.33 on it. The rest of these, I knew it had 0, -1 because that was my starting point, but this 3 right here might help me. So it's hard for me to find these other points on the graph. So find one that's easy to find on your graph. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our original paper. So when I look at this, I know this is going by 2s. So if this is 2, halfway in the middle would be a 3. And then I would have to go halfway in the middle of this one, because this would be a 2 and this is a 4. So on this graph, 3 is about right here. Okay, and that line is clearly not going through 3. On this one, if I go up and over, 3 is about right here. There's another way that you could tell. If you looked at your points, pick out a point and make sure that point is on the line if it's really difficult to read like this one. Okay, 15 is pretty easy. We do need to remember that if we are subtracting, whatever is behind the subtraction sign in the parentheses has to turn into the opposite of whatever it was. So the first part doesn't change. We've got 9 into the 7th plus 11 into the 4th plus 18. And then the rest of this turns into -2 into the 4th. And then -2 into the 7th. And then since this was a +4, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be -4. And now we want to combine like terms. I know you guys probably remember how to combine like terms, but I'm looking for something else that's into the 7th, and I have one of those. So I would do 9 minus 2, which would get me 7 into the 7th. Okay, I would want to look at the next term, and I've got a +11 into the 4th. I've got another into the 4th minus 2 into the 4th, and so those could go together. 11 minus 2 would be a +9 into the 4th. And then I've got +18. This +18 and this -4 could go together, and 18 minus 4 is a +14. And so on number 15, the correct answer is B. Okay. On number 16, I'm going to work this 2 different ways just to remind you. One thing I am noticing is that the 7 can't be pulled out of these terms. There's nothing I can factor out ahead of time. So if we're working this problem, we would want to, if you have the function on the graphing calculator to do that, that is the easiest way. Remember, you can go to that polyroot finder. If you don't have the thing on the calculator, I'm going to show you the other way too, but let's go and work this on the polyroot finder real quick. So I'm going to get out of what we were doing before. I'm going to go to apps. I'm going to pick number 9. And I do want to use the polyroot finder. It is the second order. So I'm going to hit next. And now is the part where you just want to type in what you have. So 7x² minus 40. X is what ours said, minus 12. Okay. Then we want to hit, I hit graph so it would solve it, and it's telling me the answers are negative 2/7 and 6. Okay, so if you have that, that is a good way to just go ahead and go straight to the answer. Negative 2/7 and 6 is what it said. So if I get the answer, X is negative 2/7 and X is 6, right? I think that was what it said. Then the way that you write the answer, this one's really easy. You would say X minus 6. It's always going to be the opposite of whatever this is. But this one, since it's a fraction, the denominator comes out in the front, and it would be 7x. And then this part goes in the back. And since it's a minus 2, it would be the opposite of that, which would be plus 2. And so the right answer on number 16 ends up being D. Okay, now, if you don't have that on your calculator, still not bad to solve this problem. You would simply say 7x squared minus 40x minus 12. You take the 7 times the negative 12, okay, because there's a term in the front that we cannot factor out. So 7 times negative 12 is negative 84. So that is what goes on the top of your little x. We need something that multiplies to that, and we need something that adds to negative 40. Okay, so we have to kind of brainstorm about this. So I start thinking of things that multiply to negative 84. Let's see. I'm kind of thinking about 84 divided by 2, because 2 times 42, 42 and 2 are only 2 apart, so that would get me this. But the 2 would be positive, and the 42 would need to be negative. So 2 and negative 42 would be 2 times negative 42 would give you negative 84, and 2 plus negative 42 would give you negative 40. Okay, from there, remember that you need to take these terms, and if we had something in the front, we have to divide by it. So we would divide here, divide by here, and then we would reduce our fractions. This fraction's already reduced. Okay, so we would use the 7x plus 2. Now this one you don't have to switch, but you've got 7x plus 2. And on this one, this will reduce to negative 6. And so that would give you your x minus 6. So you don't have to do the opposites like you did up here from the answers, because these aren't the answers. These are how we're factoring it. So just whichever way you want to work it. If you have the thing on your graphing calculator, that would probably be the easiest thing to go backwards from. Okay, number 17 says to solve this, assume that no radicands were formed by raising negative numbers to even powers. So we've got the square root of 9x minus 7 minus 9 equals 0. Well, I know I need to kind of get rid of the square root to get to this x, but I'm going to start by moving this minus 9 to the other side of my equal sign. So that's going to get me the square root of 9x minus 7 equals 9. Now, how do you get rid of a square root? You're going to want to, I'm going to do this in another step just so I can make sure that I explain it. So if I want to get rid of a square root, you always want to do the opposite of what's happening. So I would square it. If I square it on that side, I have to square it over here. So that's going to give me 81. And on this side, I'm going to get rid of that square root. So I'm going to add 7. 81 plus 7 is 88. And we get 9x is equal to 88. Divide by 9. And The answer that they have is 88 divided by 9, which is C. Okay. Another thing, I just want to give you a clue as why when you're taking your final. On these problems that you're having to solve like this, don't forget that this is algebra. And if you've got multiple choice and you're stuck, you can always go back in and plug in, like on this one. So we found that this was the answer. But if I didn't have a clue, I could start plugging these numbers in and see if they work. So 9 times 88 divided by 9. I'm plugging that in for x, minus 7, and then I would put my minus 9 because that's not underneath the square root. And I'd hit enter, and it's supposed to be equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, then that's not the right answer. So don't forget that, especially on your final, if you're working an algebra problem, you can plug these back in, see which one works, okay? Don't forget about that. 81. X squared minus 49, it wants us to factor this. This is the difference of squares. So this is actually really easy to factor. The square root of 81 is 9, and the square root of 49 is 7. So it's going to be 9x minus 7, and then the other one's going to be 9x plus 7. Because this is the difference, which means minus, of perfect squares, you can do this problem like that. So number 18, the correct answer is B. And you can see they've got it in reverse order, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Number 19 says add or subtract, then simplify by collecting like terms if possible. Okay, so what I'm noticing is that we cannot add these because one of them is the square root of 180 and one of them is the square root of 80. So the first thing we need to do is we need to look at 180 and we need to see if there's anything we can do to simplify this. We already have a negative 5 outside of the square root on this one. So I'm going to leave it there. I know that 2 will go into 180 90 times. 2 will go into 90 45 times. 5 will go into 45 9 times. 3 will go into 9 3 times. Okay, so we have a pair of 2's that we can pull out. That's going to come out here with the negative 5. We have a pair of 3's that we can pull out. That's going to come out here with the negative 5. Okay, and what we have left is the 5, which would go underneath here. So negative 5 times 2 is negative 10, times 3 is negative 30. Square root of 5. Okay, now I'm going to look at my 4 square root of 80. So the 4 we know can come out. 2 will go into 80 40 times. 2 will go into 80, yeah. I think I said that backwards, sorry. 2 will go into 80 40 times. 2 will go into 40 20 times. 2 will go into 20 10 times. 2 will go into 10 5 times. Pull out a 2 that would come out here with a 4 that's already there. I can pull out another 2, go with the 4 that's already there, and I've got a 5 underneath. So this is going to be 4 times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, square root of 5. So we can add those together, and that's going to be negative 30 plus 16, which is negative 14, square root of 5. The right answer is A, number 19. Another clue on this one, since this is multiple choice, if it wasn't multiple choice, you couldn't do this, but what you can do is type this in the calculator right here. If I type this in the calculator, negative 5 second square root 180 plus 4 square root of 80, it gives me this negative 31.304. Okay, and if I want to check and make sure they match, I could say negative 14 second square root 5 in my calculator. Guess what it came up with? Negative 31.304, and it keeps going just like that one did. So if they don't match, it's not the right answer. So that's another way to check your work on this. Number 20 There's 25 problems here. I do want to make sure I go all over all of these just to make sure that I know I've got some people that do want to really study for their final. So this one's pretty easy. Why? Because we have a common denominator. And so z plus 12 and z plus 12. So we know that this bottom part z plus 12. The top part is everything else. 18z plus 7 plus 4z minus 5. Then you want to combine like terms. 18z plus 4z can be 22z. And then 7 minus 5 is a positive 2. And then on the bottom, we just have z plus 12. It would be possible to factor something out of this one, but in this case, they don't have anything in common because this z doesn't have anything there. So on number 20, the correct answer is C. Okay, number 21. We know to solve this type of problem, we need it to be equal to 0. So we need to start with x squared minus x equals 30. Subtract 30 from both sides of the equal sign. And so x squared minus x minus 30 equals 0. You can use the calculator function, that polyroot finder, to do this. You would plug in ones here. So if you're doing the calculator, you would type in 1x squared minus 1x minus 30, and it would tell you the answers. This one's pretty easy. We need something that multiplies to negative 30 and adds to negative 1. So negative 6 times 5. Okay, and our answers are going to be the opposite of whatever these are. So we would do x minus 6 times x plus 5. And remember, if you're solving this by hand, you want to set them equal to 0, which is why I'm saying they're going to be the opposite. So x is 6 and x is negative 5. The calculator would just go ahead and give you these answers without you having to solve that. So on number 21, the right answer is B. Okay. It says find the product on this. They're just wanting you to use FOIL. So first, 4x times 5x plus outer, which is going to be 4x times negative 2, inner, which is going to be negative 7 times 5x. Last is going to be negative 7 times negative 2. So we're going to get 20x squared. 4x times negative 2 is a negative, so we're going to end up with minus 8x. Negative 7 times 5 is a negative, so minus 35x. Negative 7 times negative 2, positive 14. These two can come together, so 20x squared. Negative 8 minus 35 is going to be negative 43x plus 14. Okay, and so on 22, the correct answer is C. Okay. I think I'm going to do 23 last because it's a little bit complicated. I'm going to come back to that. Number 24, it says to solve this equation. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get rid of a parentheses if you have them. Second thing you want to do is combine like terms on both sides of the equal sign. So the 3x and the minus 5x could go together. That would be 3 minus 5 is negative 2. X and x, that's going to give me 2x's plus 2 on this side. Now you want to get rid of, you want to get all your x's on the same side. So we would add 2x, and we would get negative 6 equals 2. Well, this is just not true. Okay, so this is an example of one that is, hold up a minute, write something down. 2x minus 6x, x is 2x. Oh, see what I did now. So hold on, I apologize. If this had to come out like this and it was correct, I needed to slow down. Mine was not correct, but it would be not true and it would be D. Okay, but so it is possible to get that D if it's not true. But your math teacher does not know how to add. Sometimes making mistakes is the best way to learn, is what I tell myself. But this needs to be 0. This is -6. This would have been 4x. 2x and 2x is 4x. Okay, now I can subtract 2. -8 equals 4x. Divide by 4. And so x ends up being -2. And so that would be the right B, not C, would be the right answer. And I could go back and plug in -2 everywhere I see an X. So I could do 3 times -2 minus 6 minus 5 times -2. I plugged in -2 for my X's, and then make sure that when I plug it in on the other side, that those two sides are actually equal to each other. On this side, I would have a -2. On this side, we've got -6 minus 6, which is -12, plus 10, -2. So we could tell that way that's another way we know it's right. We can go back and check. And on your final, when you've got a lot of time to finish things, this is one of those times where you don't want to be lazy. You want to get that question right. So go back in and plug it in, because you can see how easy, like I accidentally thought that when I was adding 2x and 2x, I accidentally said that was 0. So I could have caught that if I had gone back in and checked to see if these other ones would have worked. Okay, so slow down and make sure that you are going back and checking problems that you're able to check. Okay, 25 says solve the inequality. So x minus 3 is greater than or equal to -8. We're going to add 3 to both sides of our equal sign. So x is greater than or equal to -5. Okay, so it does have the equal to part, which means it's going to have a bracket. If it didn't have the equal to part, it would just stay parentheses. Okay, and we want everything that is bigger than -5. So the correct answer is going to be D. If we write this in interval notation, we start at -5 and we go to infinity. Remember, infinity is always the parentheses that is open. Okay, so let's go back up here to 23, which I was kind of, it's wanting us to multiply these things. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to try to factor this to see if anything will cancel out. Okay, so we need something that multiplies to 20 and adds to 9. Well, that would be 4 and 5. 4 times 5 is your 20, and 4 plus 5 is your 9. Okay, on the bottom, we need something that multiplies to 25 and adds to 10. Well, that's going to be, and I'm sorry, this is not X's, these are K's here. Be careful about that too. This is multiple choice, so it should be okay as far as you forgetting that, but I'm the world's worst about putting an X when it's supposed to be another letter. So just slow down a little bit. I'm talking to myself as well. Okay, so I can pull out on this top part, it looks like there's a K in both of these terms up here. So I can factor out a K, which would leave me with K times K plus 5. And on the bottom of this fraction, I need something that multiplies to 28 but adds to 11. Well, something that multiplies to 28, I know that 4 times 7 is 28, and 4 plus 7 is 11. So K plus 4, K plus 7, that's going to be my 2 1s. Now, anything that you have that's the same on the top can cancel out with something that's the same on the bottom. So for instance, I've got a K plus 4 and I've got a K plus 4. I've got a K plus 5 and a K plus 5. I've got another K plus 5 and another K plus 5. Okay, so that what all I have left is K over K plus 7. These K's cannot cancel out here because this K is not being multiplied by the 7. We had all of these divided into multiplication. Okay, so the correct answer on 23 is A. So that is the final review